new pretty much now, which is huge. It was not that way this time last year. I do not have to see my transplant doctor for another 6 months. That's huge when you're used to going for a stint of time 5 times a week to UT and then living in Nashville for a little while. So we're just really happy and blessed with all the progress that we're making. But I'll go ahead and let Quillen kick us off.
Okay. I was going to open up with a verse that was given to us by Tim Miller. We were at the church one day having an opportunity for the church to pray over us, and that's something we're very grateful for, that our church leaders and staff, the church body as a whole, would allow us to come. And in a season where we aren't able to get out much, a lot of isolation, that was a tremendous impact. And so he shared with us a verse that had meant a lot to him through his season of trial with Jenny's breast cancer. And he shared with us 2 Corinthians chapter 1. And I'll just read from the beginning of verse 1, chapter 1. Paul, an apostle of Christ Jesus, by the will of God, and Timothy our brother, to the church of God that is in Corinth, which are all the saints who are on the whole of Achaia. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord of Jesus Christ. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of comfort, who comforts us in all our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction, which the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. So just as Tim in his affliction had to go through that trial, he was able to use that experience to really bless and encourage us who were going through a pretty difficult circumstance there. And that's an opportunity that we today, through our sharing, want to not only encourage you with our story, but also encourage you that I'm sure your story, if not just as equally, will be able to bless and impact other people. So just as Paul says here, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction. I think that's the main point of what we were hoping to communicate to you all today. So I'll pray for us real quick, just to add on to what Mike has said, mostly just for that our words would glorify him. Dear God, we just pray, just add on to what Mike has already prayed for us, Lord, that Abby and I would just be speaking for your glory today, that we would be able, just through our unity, just share your message, Lord. And we thank you for the grace that you've bestowed on us to just have this opportunity to share and just show others what you've done for us. So we pray, amen. And the big thing we also wanted to do to introduce ourselves, we not only have gone through a lot, but we've also been given so much. And this group in particular, and part of the church, I know you all have just been warriors for us. You've been warriors praying, you've been warriors in giving. We have received so much. The biggest thing we just wanted to express not only was our gratitude, but just to clearly say that what you've given us was a huge step in order to get through our journey. You sent us cards, letters in the mail. When you're in your season of isolation, sometimes maybe your only interaction for the day is getting a card in the mail from another human being other than ourselves. So getting to read those cards, you provided gift cards, and when we're in Nashville and I'm trying to work remotely and take her to the hospital, and then I take her home and care for her, there's such little time in the day to do anything else. So a lot of your monetary gifts were opportunities for us to just click a button on an app, have somebody show up at our door with food. Like, you really need those things in that type of season. You were able to give us just constant encouragement. The prayer, really the biggest thing. Abby and I will just share a lot of situations where you all blessed us when we could clearly see God came through, and you prayed for that. So that's something, Abby got through this season. The Lord really provided for her, and as her husband, I'm really grateful that I still have a wife today. So that's something I'm very grateful for, that all of you showed up and you prayed through your actions, through your love. And we, as we're sharing today, that your stories impact and will help someone. You all have done that for us. So we want to encourage you all that. I know you all can continue to do that for so many other people. And I'm sure you will get to hear their stories as well of how you've been able to impact them and love them through that. So thank you all for just loving on us and praying for us and being there. So thank you. Comforting us in our affliction.
always laugh and say that Dad's the crier whenever we talk about these things, but there's something about this group that's just doing it for me. One of the main passages that we're going to talk through today is in 1 Samuel chapter 7, if you want to follow along. Quillen will start us out reading out of there. Both books in Samuel have battles, there's an anointing of a king, the Ark of the Covenant, there's all kinds of different exciting things that are happening. But what we're going to talk about today is one specific scene. It stands out as a testament to the presence of God. After the Israelites had been defeated by the Philistines in battle, Samuel sets up this kind of memorial. It's a reminder that the Israelites would never forget who aided them, the Lord, in their victory over that. So Quillen's going to read that for us.
So 1 Samuel chapter 7, we'll be reading verses 1 through 12. And the men of Kiriath-Jearim came up with the ark of the Lord and brought it to the house of Abbey on the hill, and they consecrated his son Eliezer to the charge of the ark of the Lord. And from that day that the ark was lodged at Kiriath-Jearim, a long time passed, and 20 years, and all the house of Israel lamented after the Lord. And Israel said to all the house of Israel, if you are returning to the Lord with all your heart, then put away the foreign gods, the Ashtaroth, from among you, and direct your heart to the Lord, and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines. So the people of Israel put away the Baals and the Ashtaroth, and they served the Lord only. Then Samuel said, gather all Israel at Mizpah, and I will pray to the Lord for you. So they gathered at Mizpah, and drew water, and poured it out before the Lord, and fasted on that day, and said there, we have sinned against the Lord. And Samuel judged the people of Israel at Mizpah. And when the Philistines heard the people of Israel had gathered at Mizpah, the lords of the Philistines went up against Israel. And when the people of Israel heard of it, they were afraid of the Philistines. And the people of Israel said to Samuel, do not cease to pray out to the Lord our God for us, so that he may save us from the hand of the Philistines. So Samuel took a nursing lamb and offered it as a whole burnt offering to the Lord. And Samuel cried out to the Lord for Israel, and the Lord answered him. As Samuel was offering up the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to attack Israel. But the Lord thundered with a mighty sound the day against the Philistines, and threw them into confusion, and they were defeated before Israel. And the men of Israel went out from Mizpah, and pursued the Philistines, and struck them as far as Bethkar. And Samuel took a stone, and set it between Mizpah and Shin, and called its name Ebenezer. For he said, till now the Lord has helped us.
So that word in verse 12, Ebenezer, the Hebrew word means stone of help. And specifically, we don't live in Israel. We live here surrounded by the Smoky Mountains. Most everywhere that you go, whether it's downtown, whether it's Maryville, Alcoa, any area that's surrounding here, you can see those mountains about anywhere you go. Every morning, we live in Fountain City. Every drive that we are heading towards downtown, I can see the sun sphere with those mountains in the background. If you were to drive there, it would take a little over 45 minutes from downtown, probably to get to the mountains, a little over 37 miles, depending on which point that you're going to consider you're entering in. But no matter where you're at, you are always surrounded by those. You can always see them. I believe that the significance of those is similar to how these Ebenezer stones are. I can remember there were multiple times throughout my transplant journey and my illness that it would feel like it took everything within me to take one step each way. But I knew and had seen the faith and the presence of God in other people's lives, and how he had worked through their circumstances and through their hardships that I couldn't even imagine. And so knowing that truth of the God that is the same yesterday, today, and forever in this story that we've read about, 1 Samuel, he's the exact same one that's carrying me through today. There is something about when, with our story specifically, everything went on pause really quick. We were attending church, I was in the choir, Quillen was in multiple groups, I was in some groups, we had been leading high school students, We were just day in, day out. It's not that anything we were doing was necessarily wrong or bad or, going to work every day, and then all of a sudden, that quickly ended with a phone call of saying you need to come to the hospital immediately. That turned into, on July 29th, 2021, a full day of, unknowns. We have no idea what this means. What is this? What is that? And just being surrounded by many just overwhelming factors. And everything else had to stop. And so everything paused around us. It's very easy to see what should have been in front of you the whole time when there's nothing else to do and look at. I kind of say that I feel like God kind of reclaimed his place in that season. It's very easy to have your head down in the sand and looking at your circumstances just straight on. And in that season when, I didn't go to school for anything medical, anything is not anything that I do. My sister was a nurse. Even, other people in my family know a little bit more about that stuff. I don't like needles, and I don't know any of that. And that's how I know that God has a great sense of humor to put me in the circumstances that he did. And even just on Friday, I got 6 shots of vaccines. And I just know that in every step of that process, there are people that I came in contact with and that I was around and surrounded by that I never would have had the opportunity to beforehand. It wasn't in our marriage vows that I said that, I want us to have a life where we can go to UT Hospital and that's considered our time together because that's the only exclusive time that we have during the week that you're not working or I'm not sick or drugged or whatever the situation may be. It was this unique circumstance and amount of time that my dad didn't have that same influence that I did. My mom, my family, my friends, me and Quillen were the ones in there seeing these people day in and day out, whether it was the nurses at Dr. Hannah's office, whether it was the infusion women that were so sweet and helping us during different times. And it's a sphere of influence that we never would have dreamed that we would have had. But every single day, whenever we said, whatever we're going to do, and absolutely none of it is, I didn't wake up in the morning saying, oh Lord, give me this day. As much as I wish I had, or I should have in my humanness, it's more of in spite of my humanness and my selfishness and discomfort and all of these physical things that we deal with our human nature. Taking note of, I'm here, I'm isolated, there's no one else that I can talk to, there's no other influence that I have. Sure, I could, stay in contact a little bit with some of my high schoolers that I had seen, but I had walked through 3 years with some of these girls, and then all of a sudden in their senior year, I can't be around and support them. And so all I can do is learn to pray for them. All I can do is try to live out the things that I have been telling them for all these years. And a lot of that, as you all know, is much easier said than done in those different circumstances. But we as a people have not been skipped over when it comes to the presence and intentionality of God in his presence. Just this week alone, just the last few days, on Thursday and on Friday, I was able to talk to 2 different women who were affected by a bone marrow disease of some sort. Just through connections of, I didn't go out searching these people. I didn't put out, wave a flag and say, if you have any issues, I have these things. But I was laughing and telling Dad that it's kind of easy, it feels like, when things fall in your lap. But I think that God does that in a way of, if you're willing and if you have an open heart and saying, you know what, I have a circumstance that other people may not have understood or been through, but I'm going to look for ways to use this. We went fishing last week, or I should say sitting. We didn't really get anything, but we were talking about how in college I had, one of my many times, wanted to drop out, and I said, I want to be a missionary, I want to do this stuff. And he said, that is great. And in his fatherly wisdom, he said, but you are going to get a degree first. Like, you are going to finish this out. And it just reminded me that in my mind, I was thinking, oh, that means that I'm going to go live somewhere foreign, and this is going to be so cool and exciting. And through this journey, we've had more, I feel, intentional conversations, more impact than I ever could have just walking, on a street somewhere by myself. And a lot of that happened from behind a computer screen or behind my phone of on a carry bridge post or being connected with people that are all over the world that have the same disease that I did, because it's very rare. You don't just run into people every day that have it. And it's just something that I think that it's so easily missed, and something that we don't look out for because we're just so busy with day to day. We were doing, just daily life, going to work, figuring out what we're going to eat that day. Did you let the dog out? No, I didn't. Did you feed him? All of those just easy things that we can get hung up on and throughout your daily life that we don't even remember to look for those things. If we can just, again, reiterate, none of this is something that has remotely come easy. It's not something that I even think that we have come close to scratching the surface on, understanding or knowing all that is going to be encompassed, which is from last year, the couple of years ago until now. It'll be 2 years in July. In the fraction of, I've only been around 26 years. That is such a small fraction of my life, but I know that from here on out, that is going to be sprinkled throughout the rest of my story and throughout my life and my journey. That, I don't want to call it a Girl Scout badge, but I feel like in some ways that is something that those are my markings, and that's me saying, just like this Ebenezer stone of, the Lord has been with me up until this point, and I want that to be the example, and for other people, that despite all of my humanness, that God has continued to use my story in a personal way to talk to people that I never would have thought. And sprinkled out throughout Scripture, and in one of the popular hymns that we all know, we always talk about how prone to wander that the Israelites were. They were in the desert for 40 years. I mean, God provided every single thing that they needed: manna, water. I mean, I can only imagine. I feel like I change outfits 3 times a day. If you had me out in the desert walking around for 40 years, like, He's going to provide all of those things. And wandering from the God of creation, miracles, and instead of giving our attention and devotion to Him, a lot of times instead we choose to take on the little gods of comfort and ideals and whatever my American Dream translation sold me the idea of what my life was supposed to look like. It's not, and I loved all the encouragement and support and things that people would tell me, but one of the things that always rubbed me the wrong way is when people would say, well, God's not going to give you more than you can handle. And I'm like, that's not biblical. Like, we all know that that's not true. I can definitely tell you that everything that we went through, there's no way that we could handle that. And, in some ways I feel like we barely got through, but that was not at all because of us. That's when you go to that phrase that Tim talks about all the time, but God. He is the one who can bear all of our burdens. With Him, we can do all things. A lot of times we just want Him to be this security blanket that helps us get through the dark and scary time at night, and then we wake up in the morning and we're ready to just jump out of bed and go on about our day, and He's there just whenever we need it. And as soon as we're offered the smallest bit of relief, we say, oh no, I can handle it. I got it. No problem at this point. Quillen has been memorizing verses right now that he's learning with his mentorship group with Don Wilson. And he does so by reading them first, taking some cards, writing those down, reciting it over and over until he's got it perfect. And then, like on Friday, we're on our way to the smoke room and said, so what are your verses? And he's able to get those. And anytime that he is interacting with coworkers or out in his day-to-day life, those are now forever in the back of his mind. And whenever the conversation is appropriate or it lends itself to that, he can always bring those back up. And I don't know why we don't do that with our own stories. a lot of times we are in a setting like this and we'll share it as a quick praise note to some other people and then we just forget it. We might jot it down in a prayer journal or a Carry Bridge post, and it's just archived from that point. We don't really reflect on it again. The God that never changes had stories throughout this entire book that we've all read and we can reference, and how sad it is that a lot of times we know these better than the life that we do with other people and that we walk through things with and that we are close to, that we don't know the ways that God's worked in their lives. We haven't seen those things. We haven't heard about it. My generation needs to know about how God was faithful through your generation. I was just talking to Quillen last night, and I don't know the ages of everyone in this room, but my parents are almost double my age now. And so to think that they have lived more than that of my life, like, there's a lot of things that God can do in that amount of time. We saw just a number of things that God can do in just a short, less than 2 years, that were just incredible, and that people can say, yes, that is the Lord, that is God, that is not anything else. You can't say that that was anything other than Him having His hand on you. I know a lot of times, it's kind of a joke maybe at this point, but a lot of people say that my generation tends to overshare at times. But I know in my isolation and in my times of when things were going on, because so many people had shared what had happened to them or what they were going through or their struggles or the things that weren't necessarily pretty, almost every time that I had something coming up, I knew that there was someone in my brain. I know they've gone through something like this. They've gone through a really tough time too. I can reach out to them and say, how did you do it? What did you cling to? Can you just pray for me? I don't have any other words, but can you just pray for me? And that is the definition of community, is having a group of people and knowing that they're the people that are going to question with you, grieve with you, pray, study the Bible, and plead with God on your behalf. That's what these church walls are, a safe place to do that, and to come in and just dismount all the things that we've been holding up all week and just trudging through and getting through, and like, this is the place that we're going to come for healing. Just like I would go and get my infusions and all my medications at the hospital weekly, and that's what helps sustain me and keep me alive. It's the same with the body, and it's the same with us trying to go and get in all of these things. So if I was to look at my pile of Ebenezer stones throughout this time, I know each one of them is laced with blood, sweat, and tears of a community that gave, they prayed, and they shook their fists at the enemy on my behalf. They're the ones that understood a verse that is really special to us in Galatians 6. So Quillen will read that one.
Galatians 6, 9, and 10. And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. So then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially to those who are of the household of faith. I first became aware of this verse was a senior in high school, and it was during a vacation Bible school, and it was a different vacation Bible school than anything I'd ever done before in terms of VBS. Typically, it was inside a church building. I'd come as a student, or even if I was helping inside a church. This VBS at the time was actually taking camp to parts of Knoxville where there either didn't have much outreach, didn't have great access to a church, and it was an apartment complex that was right next to my high school that I drove by every single day on the way to school. I'd never even thought twice about the apartment complex or what was going on in there, but it was an incredibly impactful week. I got to befriend this child named Manny. It was mostly an Hispanic community, and it was just a wonderful week, running around, playing games with the kids, opportunities to love on them a bit. And it definitely was a community that did not have all the access necessarily to things that I had growing up. The last day of camp, we had an opportunity to do this carnival in the church parking lot. So we were able to bring all the communities from all across Knoxville that had participated in this VBS outreach. And there was food and games and all sorts of fun things. And I ended up in a bouncing house was way too big for that. But the kids wanted me to be in there, so I'm just trying not to break it, and I'm jumping up and down with the kids. And there was this child that a woman, I had not seen the child all that week, and I saw her take her daughter into the bouncing house. And the kids were familiar with the girl. They were all telling her to come on and play. And all these kids are 6 or younger. They're very very young. And she starts to try to help the girl bounce, and the mother's not able to get in the bouncing house. And immediately I realized that something was wrong. Like, the daughter was blind, and the mother was just desperately trying to provide for her child an opportunity of just fun, like getting her to be included with other kids, do normal things. And I went over to the child and I helped her bounce a couple times. And the kids were running around just asking, for her to keep playing, and I was able to bounce a couple times with her and then take her back to the mom. But it just really hit me that this community was there every single day, and I've not thought about. So in our story, where we are encouraging, hopefully you, if that's God's will, but your story as well can share with so many people. And one of the questions is, well, who do I know in my life that I could benefit my story? I work in an office, I see the same people every day, maybe they're all Christians, maybe they're not. Like, who do I have to impact? I think if you pray that prayer of, God, let me be your hands and feet. Here I am, Lord, send me. I think we'll be very surprised that there could be a whole community right next door where you pass by every single day. And that was something that always impacted me. And here, Galatians also said, especially to those of the household of faith, I think we can all agree that there are a lot of hardships in this life that we have to go through. And to be able to encourage each other to keep going is definitely a huge benefit. And probably, I would say, as much as I love Abbey, it's a difficult thing. You can do a vacation Bible school for a week, or you can endure, and faithfully provide during a year of hardship in marriage. We've done this for just almost 3 years now, and you all have, by the grace of God, done it for many more. I think we can all agree that it's definitely different than just a single week of vacation Bible school. You have to put in a little more work to be obedient to the Lord in that. So Hebrews 10:25 says, "Do not neglect to meet together, as in the habit of some, but encourage each other, and all the more as the day draws near." And so the only way that I was able to do that for Abbey, and Abbey for me in that season, was first by the grace of God. When the ideal is lacking, grace abounds. That's one of my favorite Matt Chandler isms. The community of this church, the community of our small groups, the people that we knew, our family, believers, they were able to encourage me and keep reminding me, like, hey, I know it's tough. Like, you can do this. God has already done it. You all were able to do that with your prayers. My small group met with me remotely. One day they even drove down to Nashville. Abbey's parents, my parents, would drive to Nashville while we were in Nashville for many months. Like, people would come to us and enable us to keep going. So that first question of how am I going to find people, I think you pray that and the Lord will provide. And two, when we are wondering with whatever circumstance we're going through, like, the Lord will provide and get you through that. So quick recap: the first thing we talked about, comfort in affliction. That was 2 Corinthians 1. The second one, 1 Samuel 7, the Ebenezer stones. Ebenezer itself in the original language means stone of help. And then the third one, Galatians, do not grow weary in doing good.
And just as we were talking about, there were many examples of things that God had done. I'm a very visual person, and so that was something that I really wanted to do today. So we were just going to share just a few things of, from the time of my diagnosis date, we didn't know anything was wrong. I had bruises all over my legs. They were not going away for a little while. I had already had a appointment to go get some paperwork filled out with my primary care doctor. I just happened to mention, hey, got some bruises, they're not going away. He said, we'll take some blood, I don't think anything will happen, but we'll go ahead and just take it anyway. Through that appointment, the fact that was already set up, within say probably, and it was less than 24 hours, but we got a phone call that said you need to come to the hospital immediately. You had me set up with the best hematologist, I believe, in the world. He's got schools in Egypt named after him. I mean, he is a big deal. He's been around a long time. But all of that from the get-go was already set up. All of that was exactly where I needed to be. This doctor is very hard to get in with just from on the street, and I was already set up with that day one. And as soon as we realized that something was wrong, we called our places of work and said, hey, our life has just completely changed. We don't really understand all of it yet, but we can't come in right now. And both of them said, we completely understand, you can work from home as long as you need to. So that was easily one thing that we had. We started going through all of my treatments. You know, it's very overwhelming when you don't really understand what all is happening to you as it is, but then much less all of the insurance this and, you know, this fee that and what all of it means. And at the beginning of 2022, as you all know, that deductibles reset, and that's always fun times. I had enough people donate to Medic on my behalf and give them my name whenever they were asking for credits. And because I had so much, we were able to get a check in the mail February of 2022 that covered the exact amount of what my deductible needed to be at that point in time. So that was another easy one. In October, we decided that they told me that I had a 90% success rate for this one treatment. It was a conservative treatment. A transplant doctor in Nashville, which ended up being my doctor, told me I was a perfect candidate for it. We were in the hospital for 11 days that October. We actually had someone that we're really close to in the church. They had a procedure and were on the same floor as us for a night. Just in that less than 36 hours that they were in the hospital, they got COVID and went home. It never even touched us. We were able to go home before that was even an issue. It's another thing.
In a similar way to Abby's second example, we had twice letters in the mail come in from a person where the day of or the day before we would receive a big bill, and that's probably the worst mail that you could ever receive, is a big bill in the mail. I think at that season we're expecting cards and gift cards, but that's the opposite way. But like that day, one time from a church, another time from another person, the check was the exact amount of what the bill cost was. That was just an amazing blessing.
There was a time whenever I was in that inpatient in October and my platelets were down to 0. I had absolutely nothing in me. They said that there was a shortage of platelets. And you don't think about what platelets are until you need them, because you need to stay alive. And so, excuse me, they were calling all around and trying to figure out what to do. And I don't know how long that you can live without platelets, but I know that it is not very long. They had called my dad, the doctors did, and they wanted him to get to Medic immediately. Just their process of getting something from one patient until the time that it hits the hospital is a minimum of 36 hours. So we didn't know what really that entailed. And as soon as, everyone was up and we hadn't, we put out a thing on Facebook, if you can donate, there's a shortage and people need them. And just within a little bit, they released some more to the facility, and I was able to get some of those exactly when I needed them.
When we first went to Nashville for the week before preliminary transplant appointment, there was a scheduling issue, and we got all the way there to Nashville early in the morning, and they said, oh, our appointment's actually not until like later in that evening. So we had gotten all the way there, and at first it was, oh, this is a bummer. We've driven all the way here. What are we gonna do? And then we quickly realized this was the Lord's provision, because we were able to tour many apartments and find a place to live we were given time that in this very busy season, we didn't have that. So it was the Lord showing, like, even when circumstances are different from what you expect, He probably is providing for you.
Because at that point in time, we assumed that Quillen would be able to stay with me the whole time that I was in the hospital, and they told us that because of the COVID rules, he couldn't be with me overnight at all. And so that was a big, immediate, we don't know what we're gonna do, how are we gonna handle that, and that was a blessing. But then because I'd had such a bad reaction to my ATG treatment back in October, they allowed him to stay with me overnight for all of those days that I had that treatment. Just that way, if anything happened, I had him the whole time. It's very easy to see that we are simply scratching the surface on things that no one else can explain away or say, oh, you know, these are the ways that we can say, but God, He provided, He showed up, He did all of those things. And so just as, you know, we don't have enough for everyone in the room, but just as you have your own stone of something to say, but thus far, God has showed up for us. You all have those circumstances. You all have those situations that you've come through on the other side, and whether it was what you were expecting or not. I know whenever we got married in 2020, I was a healthy individual and had long straight hair and looked completely different. We didn't have a life that is remotely resembling what it is now. But I think we can both easily say that we are better, stronger believers, we're better spouses, we are better community and church members because of everything that we've walked through. So this is where the participation part comes in of, I want to open up to you all to like allow the opportunity to share with us and each other of what's a way that has shown up that you could say, there's no other explanation but God, and He showed up for me thus far.
You was talking about the stones. I don't know if some of the older members, but Robin went through an ordeal when she had Carly. And about 6 weeks, Holly preached on stones, and they used to be around the church, but that got me through some rough times too.
Abbey, I remember, Abby's crazy uncle, but, I do know, on that story, but before I say anything about that, I wanna say, Kathy and I so many times said, you know, your first year of marriage is tough enough, and, you know, and to see what you all went through in that first year and second year, I mean, I don't think it's too far out there to say you're not gonna, you know, nothing's gonna get to that level ever again. I mean, so you all like jumped off the deep end, so the next 40, 50 years, not that you'll laugh at things that come down your driveway, but you're like, well, this is very minute. You know, this coach that we don't like, or this teacher we don't like, or this job, it's, you know, just futile compared to what you've been through. So a lot of respect, you know, but when I guess Kathy was praying with Drew, and I was looking for, you know, a different job, and the job I've had for, I guess, going on 18 years, I turned him down twice and said, no, I'm not interested. And I just prayed to God. I said, you know, if I'm too dumb to accept your will for me, let them call me back a third time. And this is a company that you don't tell them no. And I can remember getting really emotional when I got that third phone. And I told the guy that hired me, who was a believer, I said, yeah, I'm in.
You know, you're talking about how you can share your part of your story and you don't know who you're touching. We are having some storms in our life, and I have had 2 very close people that have walked through I lead the single moms ministry here, and who have been in part of that with me, and these are pretty bad, hurtful family stuff. And I've watched one walk through one of the storms we're in, and the other one being the other storm. We've got them both going on at the same time right now. And I told both of them, I said, who knew that God was gonna show us, hey, you're gonna make it through this by going through it with both of them. Because as both of these things are going on in our family, very devastating. But God already was paving that way for me to walk with them through it. Little did I ever think it would be in our family. So you never know who you're gonna touch when you're going through things.
I know Mike, when in his small group, Justin Price was in there, and of course Jack was diagnosed with leukemia, and so he was always checking on him and, you know, trying to encourage Justin and, you know, anything we could do for him and praying for him and always checking in when he had doctor's visits or anything. And then little did we know, a few months down the road, there's Abbey, and then Mike's turning to Justin asking him, hey, did you all do this? How did you handle this? You know, have you been through this? And, you know, the tables turned, like Tina was talking about, kind of the tables turned quickly. He thought he was trying to encourage and be there for Justin, and then as it turned out, they were just on that path in front of us just a little bit, and were able to provide so much insight and encouragement for us. And now Jack and Abbey are both doing beautifully.